Your dad signed you away. Those 5 words destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. I was 16 years old, crying alone on my birthday, when a stranger appeared at my door holding legal documents that proved my father had given me up 3 months earlier, in secret, without ever saying goodbye. He'd signed his name on a dotted line and erased me from his life, like I was nothing more than an inconvenience to be disposed of. But what my father didn't know was that by throwing me away, he'd just handed me the keys to his entire empire. My name is Sierra Holloway. I'm 16 years old. And this is the story of how my worst birthday became the night I discovered who I really was and what I was truly worth. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. I woke up at 7 in the morning on January 16th, 2025. The house was too quiet. That was the first thing I noticed. The absence of sound where sound should have been. No clatter of dishes from the kitchen, no muffled conversation drifting up the stairs, no smell of coffee or bacon or anything that suggested life existed beyond my bedroom door. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was early. People sleep in on weekends. Maybe they were planning something. Maybe when I walked downstairs, there would be balloons and a cake and my father would smile at me the way he smiled at Brendan and Meredith. Maybe this year would be different. I pulled on my robe and padded down the hallway, past the closed doors of my siblings' empty rooms, down the curved staircase that cost more than most people's cars. The kitchen was spotless, cold. The marble countertops gleamed under the recessed lighting, and the breakfast table sat empty, not a single place setting in sight. That's when I saw it. A yellow sticky note on the refrigerator door. Meredith's loopy handwriting scrawled across it in black marker. "Stay out of sight, freak. We're at the Monarch celebrating Dad's deal. Don't embarrass us." I read it 3 times. I kept waiting for the punchline, for someone to jump out from behind the island and yell surprise. But the house stayed silent, and the note stayed cruel, and I stood there in my bare feet on the cold tile floor, feeling something crack inside my chest. I checked my phone. 0 messages from family, but there was one text from an unknown number sent at exactly midnight. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Evie." I didn't know anyone with those initials, not yet. I walked through the hallway like a ghost haunting my own house. The walls were lined with photographs, 47 frames to be exact. I'd counted them once, during one of those long afternoons when everyone else was at some event I hadn't been invited to. 47 moments of Hartwell family history, preserved behind glass and mounted in matching silver frames. I stopped in front of the Christmas photo from 2023. There was my father in his charcoal sweater, arm around Victoria's shoulders. Brendan stood to his left, tall and polished, already practicing his future CEO smile. Meredith posed on the right, her red dress perfectly coordinated with the decorations behind her. I wasn't in the picture. I remembered that Christmas. Dad had sent me to Grandma Holloway's house 3 days before the holiday. "She's sick," he'd said. "She needs someone to take care of her." But when I'd arrived, Grandma had been perfectly healthy, confused about why I was there at all. I moved to the next frame. Hawaii, 2022. The whole family on the beach, sunset blazing behind them. I hadn't gone on that trip either. Not enough seats on the flight, Dad had explained, though I'd later seen the booking confirmation for 5 first-class tickets. The pattern repeated itself down the entire hallway. Thanksgiving dinners, birthday parties, graduation ceremonies. In 47 photographs, I appeared in exactly 3, and in each one, I'd been pushed to the edge of the frame, half my body cropped out. I reached behind the bookcase at the end of the hall, into the gap where I'd hidden things as a child. My fingers found the edge of a photograph I'd rescued from the trash years ago. Mom holding me as a baby. On the back, faded handwriting. Catherine and Sierra, 2009. Forever loved. They hadn't just forgotten my birthday. They'd spent 12 years erasing me from this family's history. I called my father at 10 in the morning. The phone rang twice before the call was rejected, not sent to voicemail. Rejected. He'd seen my name on the screen and pressed the red button. I tried again. Same result. My fingers were shaking when I typed out the text message. Dad, it's my birthday. Can we at least have dinner together tonight? The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. 2 hours later, his response came through. Busy. Victoria planned something at the club. Maybe next week. Maybe next week. I'd heard that phrase 47 times in the past year. I'd started counting after the 32nd time, when I realized it was never going to mean anything. I called Brendan. Straight to voicemail. I called Meredith. She actually answered. What do you want? Her voice was muffled, like she was holding the phone away from her face. It's my birthday. I know I left you a note. You called me a freak. I'm getting my nails done for tonight. Can't talk. The line went dead. I sat on the edge of my bed, hugging my pillow to my chest, and stared out the window at the manicured lawn below. The gardeners had been here yesterday, trimming the hedges into perfect geometric shapes. The pool glittered in the winter sunlight, covered for the season. The three-car garage held my father's Mercedes, Victoria's Range Rover, and Brendan's BMW, all gifts, all gleaming, all symbols of a family I'd never really belonged to. This house was worth $4.2 million. 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a home theater, a wine cellar, and I had never felt more alone in my entire life. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. EV again. I'll be there at 7 p.m. Don't open the door for anyone else. I pulled the memory box from under my bed. It was an old shoebox, the cardboard soft and worn from years of handling. Inside were the only things I had left of my mother. A silver bracelet engraved with S&C forever, a dried rose from her funeral, a photograph of her laughing in a garden I didn't recognize, and a letter. The letter was the most precious thing I owned. Mom had written it 3 weeks before she died, when the cancer had already taken most of her strength, but not her spirit. Her handwriting was shaky but determined, each word pressed deep into the paper like she was trying to make them permanent. My darling Sierra, it began, if you're reading this, I'm no longer there to tell you in person, so let me say it now, as many times as I can fit on this page. You are loved. You are worthy. You are the best thing I ever did in my life. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't deserve to be happy. Not your father, not anyone. You are extraordinary, my sweet girl. Never forget that. I'd read those words 1,000 times. On bad days, I'd read them until I could recite them from memory, until they became a shield against everything my family threw at me. Mom died when I was 4. Dad remarried Victoria 8 months later. I'd spent 12 years trying to earn his love, trying to prove I belonged in this new family he'd built without me. But sitting there on my bedroom floor holding my mother's letter, I finally understood something. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that they'd never wanted me here at all. At the bottom of the box, beneath the bracelet, I found a photograph I'd never noticed before. Mom standing with another woman, both of them young and smiling. On the back, Catherine and Eleanor, Hartwell Industries grand opening 1999. Eleanor, EV. I wasn't supposed to go into my father's study. That had been the rule since I was old enough to understand rules. The study was Dad's sanctuary, his private domain, the one room in the house where I was explicitly forbidden. But Dad was at the Monarch, celebrating some deal worth $12 million, and I was alone in a house that had never felt like home. The door wasn't even locked. His desk was immaculate, leather blotter, crystal paperweight, a photograph of Victoria and the kids that definitely didn't include me. But there, sitting in the center like it had been waiting for me, was a manila envelope from Morrison & Associates, attorneys at law. I didn't recognize the firm. Our family lawyer had always been Harold Finch, a kind old man who'd sent me birthday cards every year until he suddenly stopped coming around in 2014. I opened the envelope. The document inside made my hands go numb. Voluntary termination of parental rights. My name was already filled in. The signature line for the parent was blank, but a date had been penciled in at the top. October 15th, 2024. 3 months ago. My father had been planning to sign away his rights to me for 3 months. He'd hired a new lawyer, drafted the paperwork, set a date, and never said a word. I flipped to the second page and found a handwritten note clipped to the corner. Victoria's handwriting, small and precise. Make sure she doesn't find out until after the gala. We need the optics. The optics. They were waiting until after tonight's celebration to throw me away, because they didn't want anything to ruin their perfect public image. I put the documents back exactly where I'd found them. Then I walked out of the study and closed the door behind me, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I went back to the study. I couldn't stop myself. The manila envelope sat on the desk like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, and I needed to understand exactly how deep the knife had gone. This time, I looked more carefully. Behind the termination paperwork, I found a printed email chain. The header showed it was sent on October 2nd, 2024, from my father's personal account to someone at Morrison & Associates. Eleanor Vance has been asking questions about the original will. We need to finalize Sierra's guardianship transfer before her 16th birthday. The inheritance clause expires 30 days after she turns 16 if no legal guardian claims it. I read the words 3 times, trying to make them mean something other than what they obviously meant. There was an original will. There was an inheritance clause. There was someone named Eleanor who'd been trying to find out about it. And my father was racing against time to make sure I never learned what I was supposed to inherit. I did the math in my head. Today was January 16th. If the clause expired 30 days after my birthday, that meant I had until February 15th to figure out what was going on. 1 month. 30 days to uncover whatever my father had been hiding for the past 12 years. The email mentioned Harold Finch nowhere. Dad had hired new lawyers specifically to handle this. Lawyers who didn't know our family history, who wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions. But someone named Eleanor Vance had been asking questions. The same Eleanor from the photograph with my mother. The same Evie who'd texted me at midnight. The same person who was coming to my door at 7 o'clock tonight. I looked at the clock on my father's desk. 4:32 p.m. 2.5 hours until I found out what I'd been missing my entire life. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror at 6:45. The girl staring back at me had red-rimmed eyes and tangled hair and the kind of exhaustion that comes from crying for hours. She looked defeated. She looked exactly like someone who'd been told her whole life that she didn't matter. I thought about my options. I could do nothing. I could let my father complete the paperwork, let them shuffle me off to wherever unwanted children go, let the inheritance, whatever it was, slip away without ever knowing what I'd lost. I could spend the rest of my life being invisible, being the family's dirty secret, being the freak they'd always called me. Or I could open the door at 7 o'clock. I could meet this Eleanor Vance, whoever she was. I could find out what my mother had been part of, what my grandfather's will actually said, what my father was so desperate to hide. I could fight for something, even if I didn't know exactly what I was fighting for yet. My mother's letter was still in my pocket. I pulled it out and read the last line again. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't deserve to be happy. I looked at the photograph of Mom and Eleanor from 1999. You didn't raise me to be a ghost, I whispered to her image. You didn't raise me to disappear. I washed my face. I brushed my hair. I put on the nicest dress I owned. A simple navy blue that I'd bought with my own babysitting money because no one in this family had ever taken me shopping. At 6:58, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Not my father's Mercedes, not Victoria's Range Rover, a black sedan with Massachusetts plates. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. The woman on my doorstep was not what I expected. She was 58 years old, maybe, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant twist and sharp blue eyes that reminded me of winter mornings. She wore a cashmere coat the color of charcoal and carried herself like someone who'd spent decades walking into rooms and commanding attention. But when she saw me, her composure cracked. just for a moment, just enough for me to see something raw and painful flash across her face. "Sierra Holloway?" Her voice was steady, but I caught the slight tremor underneath. "Who are you?" "My name is Eleanor Vance." She paused, studying my face like she was looking for something. Or someone. "I was your mother's best friend, and as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, I am your legal guardian." She held out a brown envelope thick with documents. I took it with numb fingers and pulled out the first page. Voluntary termination of parental rights. But this version wasn't blank. My father's signature sprawled across the bottom, notarized and dated October 15, 2024. "He signed it," I heard myself say. "He actually signed it." 3 months ago. Eleanor's jaw tightened. "He signed you away without telling you, without giving you a choice, without even having the decency to say goodbye. And he did it because he was afraid of you." "Afraid of me?" I almost laughed. "I'm 16. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody, Sierra." Eleanor stepped closer, and I saw tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. "You're the sole heir to 51% of Hartwell Industries. Your grandfather made sure of that before he died, and your father has spent the last 12 years trying to make sure you never found out." The envelope suddenly felt very heavy in my hands. "I think," Eleanor said softly, "we need to talk." We sat in the living room, a room I'd never been allowed to use when the family was home. Eleanor placed a second envelope on the coffee table between us. This one was older, the paper yellowed at the edges, the seal cracked but still bearing the impression of a law firm's stamp. "Your grandfather was Thomas Hartwell," she began. "He founded Hartwell Industries in 1999, but he didn't do it alone. I was his partner. We built that company together from nothing into what it is today, a medical components manufacturer worth $180 million. I knew the company, of course. Everyone in Boston knew Hartwell Industries. I just hadn't known my family's connection to it went deeper than my father's CEO title. When Thomas wrote his will in December of '99, he included a very specific clause." Eleanor pulled a document from the envelope, thick, legal-sized paper covered in dense paragraphs. Section 7.3. It states that 51% of the company's shares shall be transferred to his sole legitimate granddaughter upon her 16th birthday, provided her legal guardian at that time confirms the transfer in writing. His sole legitimate granddaughter. I stared at her. "That's me. That's you. Thomas knew what kind of man your father was becoming. He wanted to make sure you'd be protected, that you'd have power Richard couldn't take away." Eleanor's voice hardened. "But Thomas died in 2013, the same year your mother passed. Richard buried the will. He fired Harold Finch, the family attorney who'd witnessed it. He removed me from the board of directors. And he spent the next 12 years pretending this document didn't exist. But you found it. Harold kept the original." A small, fierce smile crossed her face. "And I've spent 5 years building a case to get it back to you." Eleanor checked her watch. "We don't have much time." "Time for what?" "Tonight, your father is hosting the 25th anniversary gala for Hartwell Industries at the Monarch Hotel. 300 guests, investors, partners, journalists from the Boston Business Journal. He's planning to announce a $12 million contract with Meridian Medical at 9 o'clock. She leaned forward. "And at 9:15, we're going to walk in and show everyone exactly who the real owner of that company is." My stomach dropped. "You want me to crash my father's party?" "I want you to claim what's rightfully yours. There's a difference." Eleanor's eyes were steady, unwavering. "Sierra, if you don't act within 30 days of your 16th birthday, the inheritance clause expires. Your father knows that. It's why he's been so careful to keep you isolated, to make you feel worthless, to convince you that you don't deserve anything. He's been running out the clock." I thought about the note on the refrigerator. "Stay out of sight, freak." "What if it doesn't work?" I asked. "What if we go there and he just denies everything?" "He can't deny a notarized will that's on file with the Suffolk County Probate Court. He can't deny the signature of a witness who's still alive and willing to testify, and he can't deny the guardianship papers that give me the legal authority to confirm your inheritance." Eleanor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the winter darkness. "Your father built his empire by silencing the people who could expose him. Tonight, we take away his silence." She turned back to me and held out a garment bag I hadn't noticed her carrying. "Your mother picked this out years ago. She always hoped you'd wear it on a night that mattered." I unzipped the bag. Inside was a navy blue gown, elegant and simple, the same shade as my mother's eyes in every photograph. I changed into the dress in my bedroom, the fabric sliding over my skin like water. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the girl who'd been crying alone in the kitchen that morning. I saw someone else, someone who looked like she belonged in a ballroom full of powerful people, someone who looked like she had every right to be there. I picked up my phone and stared at my father's contact. 0 messages, 0 missed calls. He hadn't thought about me once all day. I pressed the call button anyway. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. His recorded voice, smooth and professional. "You've reached Richard Hartwell. Leave a message." "Dad," I said quietly, "it's Sierra. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. I spent 16 years trying to earn your love, trying to be good enough, trying to prove I deserved to be part of this family. But I understand now. I was never the problem. You were." I paused, letting the words settle. "See you tonight." I ended the call and slipped the phone into my clutch. Eleanor was waiting in the hallway, her car keys in hand. "Ready?" "Almost." I walked to my bedroom one last time and retrieved the photograph of my mother and Eleanor from 1999. I tucked it into my purse, next to my mother's letter. On the way to the car, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized it now. "Miss Holloway?" The voice was older, gravelly, but warm. "This is Harold Finch. I've been waiting 12 years for this call. The original will is in my possession, notarized and verified. I'll meet you at the gala." "Mr. Finch," I said, "there's something else you should know. My mother wasn't just Richard's wife. She was a founding shareholder, and her shares transferred to me the day she died." The silence on the other end lasted 3 full seconds. "Then we have even more to discuss," he finally said. "I'll see you at 9. The drive to the Monarch took 23 minutes. Eleanor kept her eyes on the road, but her voice filled the silence between us, painting a picture of a woman I'd only known through photographs and faded letters. "Your mother was the first accountant Hartwell Industries ever hired," she said. 1999, right out of college. Thomas adored her, said she had the sharpest mind he'd ever seen and the kindest heart to match. When Richard started working at the company, Catherine was the one who trained him. "She trained my father?" "She did. And somewhere along the way, he convinced her to marry him." Eleanor's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "I tried to warn her. I saw who Richard really was, ambitious, calculating, willing to do anything to get ahead. But Catherine believed in second chances. She believed people could change." The city lights blurred past the window. "What happened?" "In 2012, Catherine discovered that Richard had been embezzling from the company. $2.3 million, funneled into offshore accounts. She was going to report him to the board." Eleanor's voice dropped. "And then she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She died before she could expose him." I felt something cold settle in my chest. He got away with it. For 12 years. Eleanor glanced at me. "But before she died, Catherine gave me something. A USB drive with all the evidence, bank records, transfer documents, everything. I couldn't find it for years. I thought it was lost." "Where was it?" "Hidden in a jewelry box, in your mother's closet." A sad smile crossed her face. "The closet your father cleaned out and donated to charity 6 months after she died. I only recovered the USB last year when I tracked down the woman who'd bought the box at an estate sale." The Monarch's glittering facade appeared on the horizon. "Tonight isn't about the embezzlement," Eleanor said. "That's a fight for another day. Tonight is about your inheritance, one battle at a time. Harold Finch was waiting for us in the hotel lobby. He was 67 years old, with silver hair and a weathered leather briefcase that looked like it had survived decades of legal battles. When he saw me, his eyes went soft with something that might have been grief. "You look just like her," he said quietly. "Catherine, you have her eyes." "Mr. Finch?" I shook his hand, surprised by the strength of his grip. "Thank you for coming. I've been waiting 12 years for this moment, Miss Holloway. 12 years of watching your father destroy everything Thomas built, knowing I had the evidence to stop him, but no legal standing to use it." He opened his briefcase and withdrew a document. Thick, official, bearing the seal of the Suffolk County Probate Court. "This is the original last will and testament of Thomas Hartwell, dated December 15, 1999. I witnessed his signature. I filed it with the court. And I kept a copy when your father tried to have it destroyed." I took the document carefully, as if it might crumble in my hands. The paper was yellowed but intact, the signatures clear and legible. Section 7.3 was highlighted in faded yellow marker. 51% of Hartwell Industries shares shall be transferred to the sole legitimate granddaughter of Thomas Hartwell upon her 16th birthday, provided her legal guardian at that time confirms the transfer in writing. "Richard fired me in 2014, Finch continued. "He told everyone I'd retired. But the truth was, I refused to destroy this document. I refused to help him steal from his own daughter." He straightened his tie. "Tonight, I testify. And tonight, the truth finally comes out." Through the lobby windows, I could see the grand ballroom doors. Light and music spilled out every time someone entered or exited. My father was in there somewhere, celebrating his empire. He had no idea it was about to crumble. I stood at the edge of the grand ballroom's entrance, looking through the glass doors at a world I'd never been invited to join. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting prismatic light across 300 guests in evening wear. Waiters in white jackets circulated with champagne flutes and silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played something classical in the corner, their music barely audible over the hum of conversation and laughter. A massive banner stretched across the back wall. "Hartwell Industries, 25 years of excellence." And there, at the center of it all, was my father. Richard Hartwell stood near the main stage, shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit, the Meridian medical representative, I assumed. Victoria was beside him, radiant in a red gown that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Brendan worked the room like he'd been born to it, all confident smiles and firm handshakes. Meredith posed for photographs with investors, her freshly manicured nails glinting under the lights. They looked perfect. They looked happy. They looked like a family that had deliberately left me behind. "This is his stage," Eleanor said softly, standing beside me. "He spent 6 months planning this night. Every detail, every guest, every moment, all designed to cement his legacy as the face of Hartwell Industries. And we're about to take it away from him." "No." Eleanor's hand found my shoulder. "We're about to give it back to the person it always belonged to. There's a difference." I watched my father laugh at something the Meridian representative said. He looked so confident, so certain that his secrets were safe. The clock on the wall read 8:55. "It's time," Finch said, adjusting his briefcase. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and pushed open the ballroom doors. The ballroom fell silent in waves. It started near the entrance, where the first guests noticed me, a teenage girl in a navy gown, flanked by an elegant older woman and a man with a lawyer's briefcase. Conversations stuttered and stopped. Heads turned. The whispers spread like ripples across water, moving through the crowd until they reached the stage. Meredith saw me first. Her champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Her eyes went wide, then narrow, then furious. She set down her drink and cut through the crowd toward me, her heels clicking against the marble floor. What the hell are you doing here? She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Dad said you were supposed to stay home. I didn't flinch. Dad says a lot of things, most of them are lies. You need to leave. Now. Her voice dropped to a hiss. Before you embarrass everyone. I'm not here to embarrass anyone, Meredith. I gently removed her hand from my arm. I'm here to tell the truth. The truth? She laughed, but there was panic underneath it. What truth? You're nobody. You're nothing. You're just the majority shareholder of this company. I said it quietly, but the words carried. Nearby guests stopped pretending not to listen. Or I will be, in about 15 minutes. Meredith's face went pale. Behind her, I saw Brendan pushing through the crowd, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. He reached us just as Meredith started to sputter a response. Security! Brendan's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. We have an intruder! Two men in dark suits started moving toward us from the perimeter of the room, but Eleanor stepped forward, and something in her bearing made them hesitate. I wouldn't do that if I were you, she said calmly. Not unless you want to be named in the lawsuit. Brendan grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave bruises. I don't know what game you're playing, he hissed, trying to drag me toward the exit. But it ends now. You're embarrassing the entire family. Let go of me. You're nothing but a charity case. His voice rose loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. Dad kept you around for tax purposes. You think anyone here cares about you? You think you matter? I stood my ground. Brendan, do you know why Dad signed away his parental rights 3 months ago? He faltered, just for a second, but I saw it. What are you talking about? He didn't tell you? I tilted my head. He signed papers giving up custody of me in October. Official, notarized. He's been planning to get rid of me for months. That's none of your business. That's a family matter. I'm not family anymore, remember? He made sure of that. I pulled my wrist free. But here's the thing, Brendan. He didn't do it because I'm a freak. He did it because he was afraid I'd find out about grandfather's will. The color drained from Brendan's face. Around us, guests had stopped pretending to have their own conversations. Cell phones appeared in hands. Someone was definitely recording. There is no will, Brendan said, but his voice cracked on the last word. There is. Dated December 1999, filed with the Suffolk County Probate Court, and it says that 51% of this company belongs to me. Brendan opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For the first time in my life, my brother had no words. And across the ballroom, I saw my father finally notice the commotion. His smile vanished. His champagne glass lowered. Our eyes met. He knew. My father crossed the ballroom in 12 seconds. I counted. It gave me something to focus on besides the pounding of my heart. He moved through the crowd like a shark through water, guests parting automatically, conversations dying in his wake. By the time he reached us, his expression had settled into something carefully neutral, but I could see the fury burning underneath. Sierra. His voice was controlled, pleasant, the voice he used for investors and journalists. What a surprise. I didn't realize you were coming tonight. Happy birthday to me, Dad. Or did you forget? A muscle twitched in his jaw. This isn't the time or place for family discussions. We'll talk about this at home. Home? I let the word hang in the air. You mean the house you signed me out of 3 months ago? The guests closest to us went very still. I don't know what Eleanor has been telling you, my father said, shooting a venomous look at the woman beside me. But she's been trying to destroy this company for years. She's manipulating you. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice carrying across the growing circle of onlookers. Richard, I don't need to destroy anything. You've done that all by yourself, every time you lied, every time you hid documents, every time you treated your own daughter like she didn't exist. This is slander. I'll have you arrested. For what? Telling the truth? Eleanor's smile was sharp as glass. For bringing the original will that you tried to bury? My father's gaze snapped to Harold Finch, who had been standing quietly at the edge of our group, briefcase in hand. The color drained from Richard Hartwell's face. Harold. The word came out strangled. You're supposed to be dead? Finch raised an eyebrow. Sorry to disappoint you, Richard. I'm very much alive, and I have 12 years of testimony to deliver. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like nothing you did was ever good enough, comment yes below. I want to know I'm not alone. And if you want to see what happened when my father finally saw the will he'd been hiding for 12 years, hit subscribe and keep watching. What comes next changed everything. Victoria appeared at my father's side like a red-gowned shadow. This is absurd. Her voice cut through the murmuring crowd, sharp and dismissive. Richard, why are we entertaining this? She's clearly having some kind of episode. I'm not having an episode, Mrs. Hartwell. Of course you are, dear. Victoria's smile was pitying, the kind adults give to children throwing tantrums. You've always been fragile, unstable. It's not your fault. Mental illness runs in families, and your mother was never quite right either. The words hit me like a slap. Don't you dare talk about my mother. Catherine was a nobody. Victoria's voice rose, playing to the crowd now. A gold digger who trapped Richard with a pregnancy. She was never meant to be part of this family, and neither are you. I felt Eleanor stiffen beside me, but I held up my hand. Let her talk. Let everyone hear exactly who Victoria Hartwell really was. My mother, I said quietly, was the founding accountant of Hartwell Industries. She helped build this company from the ground up. And in 2012, she discovered that her husband had embezzled $2.3 million from the business. The ballroom went silent. She died before she could report it, I continued. But she kept records, bank statements, transfer documents, everything. Victoria's face went white. Across the room, the Meridian medical representative stood up from his table. Mr. Hartwell, he called out, his voice cutting through the silence. What is she talking about? My father didn't answer. He couldn't. Because for the first time in 12 years, someone had finally said the truth out loud, and 300 witnesses had heard every word. I saw a woman near the stage pull out her phone and start typing. Press badge on her lanyard. Boston Business Journal. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was news, Brendan snapped. Maybe it was the champagne. He'd been drinking steadily all night. Maybe it was the fear, finally breaking through his arrogant facade. Or maybe it was simply that he'd never learned to control himself when things didn't go his way. He grabbed the microphone from the event coordinator and stormed onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen! His voice boomed through the speakers, silencing the chaos. I apologize for this disruption. I need to address what you've just witnessed. My father reached for him. Brendan, don't. But Brendan was already talking. This girl, he pointed at me, his hands shaking with rage, is my half-sister. A mistake from my father's first marriage. She has no claim to anything in this company. She's not even part of our family anymore. The crowd murmured. My father signed away his parental rights months ago, Brendan continued, apparently thinking this helped his case. Legally, officially, she's nothing to us. She has no standing here. She's just a bitter, jealous child trying to ruin our celebration. Eleanor's hand found my shoulder. I felt her squeeze gently. Thank you, Brendan, she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom without a microphone. You just confirmed everything we needed. Brendan's face went slack. What? You just publicly acknowledged that Richard terminated his parental rights, which means the guardianship transfer to me is valid, which means I have the legal authority to confirm Sierra's inheritance. Eleanor turned to the crowd. Under the terms of Thomas Hartwell's original will, Harold Finch stepped forward, briefcase open. Near the stage, I saw the Boston Business Journal reporter scribbling furiously. 2 other journalists had joined her, cameras raised. This wasn't a family drama anymore. This was a corporate scandal unfolding in real time. And Brendan had just handed us the evidence on a silver platter. Harold Finch walked to the stage with the steady confidence of a man who had waited over a decade for this moment. The crowd parted for him. Security guards looked to my father for direction, but Richard Hartwell stood frozen, his face the color of old ash. Finch took the microphone from Brendan's limp hand. "Ladies and gentlemen." His voice was calm, measured, the voice of a man who had spent 40 years in courtrooms. "My name is Harold Finch. I served as the family attorney for Thomas Hartwell, the founder of this company, from 1999 until 2014, when I was terminated by Richard Hartwell." He opened his briefcase and withdrew the document I'd seen earlier. "This is the original last will and testament of Thomas Hartwell, dated December 15, 1999. It was notarized, witnessed, and filed with the Suffolk County Probate Court." He held it up so the crowd could see the official seals. "I have verification reports from 3 independent handwriting experts confirming its authenticity." He began to read. Section 7.3. 51% of Hartwell Industries shares shall be transferred to the sole legitimate granddaughter of Thomas Hartwell upon her 16th birthday, provided her legal guardian at that time confirms the transfer in writing. Finch lowered the document and looked directly at my father. "Sierra Holloway turned 16 today. Eleanor Vance became her legal guardian today, thanks to the parental rights termination that Richard himself signed. The conditions of the will have been met." The Meridian medical representative rose from his seat again. "This changes the ownership structure of the entire company. We need to pause the contract signing until this is resolved." My father finally found his voice. "This is a family matter. It has nothing to do with business." "With respect, Mr. Hartwell," the representative replied coldly, "if your company's ownership is in dispute, it has everything to do with business." My father grabbed the microphone. "This document is a forgery." His voice had lost its smooth control. Desperation cracked through the professional veneer. "My father never wrote this. Eleanor Vance has been trying to steal this company for years. This is just her latest scheme." Harold Finch didn't flinch. "The will has been verified by 3 independent handwriting analysts," he said calmly. "Their reports are on file with the probate court. I have copies here if anyone wishes to examine them." He pulled a folder from his briefcase, 3 separate documents, each bearing official letterheads and professional certifications. "Furthermore," Finch continued, "the original will was filed with Suffolk County in January of 2000, immediately after Thomas signed it. The filing receipt is part of the public record. Anyone can verify it." My father's face contorted. "Eleanor manipulated my father when he was old and confused." "Thomas signed this will when he was 52 years old," Eleanor interrupted, her voice cutting through his protest. "The same age you are now, Richard. He was sharp, healthy, and completely lucid. He knew exactly what kind of man you were becoming. That's why he wrote this clause, to protect his granddaughter from you." "This is slander." "It's documented fact." Eleanor stepped closer to the stage. "And if you'd like to discuss slander, perhaps we should talk about the 12 years you spent telling everyone Harold had retired, when in reality you fired him for refusing to destroy this will." The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were watching in stunned silence, 300 witnesses to a family empire crumbling in real time. The Meridian medical representative was already on his phone, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. I saw at least 6 people recording video. My father had built his reputation on control, on the careful management of his public image, and in the space of 15 minutes, that image had shattered completely. Eleanor reached into her coat and withdrew a final document. "I have one more piece of evidence for the record," she said, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "This is a printed email sent from Richard Hartwell's personal account to Morrison & Associates on October 2, 2024. She held it up, and I recognized it immediately, the same email I'd found in my father's study that afternoon. "I'll read the relevant portion," Eleanor continued. "Eleanor Vance has been asking questions about the original will. We need to finalize Sierra's guardianship transfer before her 16th birthday. The inheritance clause expires 30 days after she turns 16 if no legal guardian claims it. She lowered the paper and looked at my father. You didn't just hide the will, Richard. You actively conspired to ensure your daughter would never learn about her inheritance. You signed away your parental rights not because you didn't want her, though that's certainly true, but because you needed her out of the family before she turned 16, before she could legally claim what was hers. The Boston Business Journal reporter raised her hand. Mr. Hartwell, do you have any comment on this email? My father's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. Victoria clutched his arm, her perfect composure finally cracking. Richard, say something. Deny it. But there was nothing to deny. The email was real. The will was real. The guardianship papers were real. Every lie he'd told for 12 years was unraveling in front of 300 witnesses and multiple journalists. Some guests were already heading for the exits, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Others remained rooted in place, unable to look away from the spectacle. The Meridian medical representative ended his phone call and walked toward the stage. Mr. Hartwell, he said flatly, we'll be in touch. Our legal team will review the situation before any further discussions. The $12 million deal was dead. I walked to the stage. My legs felt unsteady, but I kept moving. Past the frozen security guards, past my shell-shocked siblings, past my father who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 20 minutes. Harold Finch offered me the microphone, and I took it with hands that barely trembled. 300 faces stared up at me. Investors, partners, journalists, people who had never known I existed until tonight. My name is Sierra Holloway, I said, and my voice came out stronger than I expected. I am the granddaughter of Thomas Hartwell and the daughter of Catherine Holloway, two people who helped build this company from nothing. I paused, letting the words settle. For 12 years, I was told I was a burden, a freak, someone who didn't belong. I was erased from family photographs. I was excluded from holidays and celebrations. And finally, 3 months ago, I was signed away like unwanted property, without my knowledge, without my consent, without even the courtesy of a goodbye. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. But I'm not here tonight for revenge. I looked out at the crowd, at the recording phones, the scribbling journalists, the stunned faces of people who had spent years believing my father's carefully constructed lies. I'm here for the truth, and the truth is this. Hartwell Industries was never just my father's company, it was my grandfather's legacy. It was my mother's work, and now it's mine to protect. I handed the microphone back to Finch. I don't want to destroy this company, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I want to rebuild it, with integrity, with transparency, with respect for everyone who helped create it. For a long moment, the ballroom was silent. Then someone near the back began to clap. Others joined. Not everyone, but enough to matter. My father stood like a statue carved from ice. The applause had died down, replaced by the shuffle of guests gathering their things, the murmur of conversations that would fuel Boston's gossip networks for weeks. But Richard Hartwell didn't seem to hear any of it. He stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not contempt, but something closer to disbelief. As if he couldn't comprehend that the daughter he'd spent 12 years erasing had just dismantled his empire in 15 minutes. Victoria was crying, not elegant, dignified tears, but the ugly, gasping sobs of someone whose world had just collapsed. Her mascara ran in dark rivers down her cheeks, ruining the perfect makeup she'd spent hours applying. "This can't be happening!" She grabbed my father's arm, shaking him. "Richard, do something! Fix this!" He didn't respond. Brendan stood at the edge of the stage, his earlier bravado completely gone. He looked young suddenly, and lost, like a child who'd just realized the adults weren't going to save him. "Dad?" His voice cracked. "Is it true? Did you really hide the will?" The silence stretched for 5 seconds. 10. My father still didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Meredith hadn't moved from where she'd been standing when I first entered the ballroom. She watched me now with an expression I couldn't read. Not hatred, not anger, but something more complicated. Something that might have been the first stirrings of understanding. Around us, the gala continued to empty. Guests who'd arrived expecting champagne and celebration were leaving with scandal and speculation. The 25th anniversary of Hartwell Industries would be remembered, but not for the reasons my father had planned. I watched the Meridian medical representative disappear through the main doors without looking back. The $12 million deal was gone, and so was everything my father had worked to build. We met in a private conference room on the hotel's second floor. The chaos of the ballroom felt distant here, muffled, contained, like a storm viewed through thick glass. Eleanor sat across from me, her composure finally showing cracks of exhaustion. Harold Finch spread documents across the polished table, his movements methodical and precise. "The will is airtight," he said. "I filed the original with the probate court in January of 2000. Richard's lawyers can challenge it, but they won't win. The authentication is bulletproof." "What happens now?" I asked. "We file for formal recognition of the inheritance with Suffolk County. Given the evidence we presented tonight and the number of witnesses, the court will likely expedite the process. I estimate 30 to 60 days for the share transfer to be finalized." Eleanor leaned forward. "Richard will almost certainly contest it. He has the resources to drag this out." "He can try?" Finch closed his briefcase with a definitive click. "But contesting a notarized will with 3 independent verifications and a witness who was present at the signing? He'd be throwing money away. His lawyers will tell him the same thing." I thought about my father, standing frozen on that stage. The way his face had crumbled when he realized there was no lie left to tell. "I don't want to destroy the company," I said quietly. "My grandfather built it. My mother helped grow it. I just want it to be run honestly." That's exactly what Thomas wanted. Finch's eyes softened. "He wrote that clause because he knew Richard would try to take everything. He wanted you to have the power to stop him." Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You don't have to figure everything out tonight," she said. "The law will do its work. Right now, you just need to rest." Rest? I wasn't sure I remembered how. Eleanor's apartment was nothing like my father's house. It was smaller, for one thing. A 2-bedroom unit in Back Bay with exposed brick walls and windows that looked out over the Charles River. But it was warm in a way the Hartwell mansion had never been. Books lined every available surface. Plants crowded the windowsills. The kitchen smelled like someone actually cooked there. "This was your mother's room," Eleanor said, opening a door at the end of the hallway. "When we were in college, before she married Richard. I kept it the same, mostly. I always hoped—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The room was simple. A twin bed with a blue quilt, a wooden desk, a bookshelf filled with worn paperbacks. On the wall hung a framed photograph of 2 young women laughing in front of a Christmas tree, their arms around each other, my mother and Eleanor, before everything went wrong. "You can change anything you want," Eleanor said. "Paint the walls, get new furniture. This is your home now, for as long as you want it to be." My home. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my fingers over the quilt. It smelled faintly of lavender, like someone had been washing it regularly, even though no one had slept here in years. "You don't have to be strong right now," Eleanor said softly. "You've been strong enough for one lifetime already. It's okay to let go." I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the tears on my cheeks. But these weren't the tears I'd cried that morning, alone in a cold kitchen with a cruel note on the refrigerator. These were different. These were the tears of someone who had finally, after 16 years, found a place where she belonged. Eleanor held me while I sobbed, and she didn't let go. My phone buzzed at 11:30 that night. I was lying in my mother's old bed, exhausted but unable to sleep, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. Eleanor had made me chamomile tea and toast, had sat with me until my tears ran dry, had finally retreated to her own room with a promise that she was just down the hall if I needed her. The text was from Meredith. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment before opening it. I didn't know about the will. I didn't know Dad signed you away. I thought you just didn't want to be part of the family. I read the words 3 times, trying to find the angle. Meredith never did anything without a reason. Every kindness came with strings attached. Another message appeared. I'm sorry for calling you a freak. I was wrong. 2 sentences, 12 words. Nothing that could undo 12 years of cruelty. But something in my chest shifted anyway. I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed time to figure out what I felt, what I wanted, whether forgiveness was even possible. Meredith's apology didn't erase the notes on the refrigerator, the whispered insults, the years of being treated like an unwanted guest in my own home. An apology was a first step, but first steps didn't mean anything without the second and third and 100th steps that followed. I noticed that Brendan hadn't texted. No message, no apology, no acknowledgement that anything had happened at all. Maybe that was answer enough. I set my phone on the nightstand and pulled my mother's quilt up to my chin. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and paperwork and difficult conversations. Tonight, I just needed to breathe. For the first time in 16 years, I fell asleep without crying. The Boston Business Journal published the story at 6 in the morning. Eleanor was already awake when I stumbled into the kitchen, her laptop open on the breakfast table, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her. The headline glowed on the screen. Hartwell Industries Gala ends in chaos. Hidden will surfaces. CEO's daughter claims majority stake. I sat down and read. The article was thorough. It quoted Harold Finch extensively, referenced the probate court filings, and included a damning summary of the email I'd found in my father's study. There were photographs from the gala, my father's ashen face, Victoria's mascara-streaked cheeks, Brendan frozen at the microphone mid-confession. And there was a photograph of me, standing on that stage in my mother's navy dress, looking more confident than I'd felt. Hartwell Industries stock dropped 8% in pre-market trading, Eleanor said quietly. The Meridian Medical deal is officially on hold pending corporate governance review. I scrolled through the article's comment section. Hundreds of responses already, some sympathetic, some skeptical, some simply hungry for more scandal. What happens now? Now we wait for the legal process to work. Eleanor closed her laptop. The court will schedule a hearing within the next 2 weeks. Richard's lawyers will file motions, make noise, try to delay. But the evidence is overwhelming. It's only a matter of time. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Miss Holloway, this is Jennifer Walsh from the Boston Globe. We'd like to interview you about last night's events. Please call at your earliest convenience. I showed the message to Eleanor. There will be more of those, she said. You don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to. But if you do decide to speak, we'll do it together. On your terms. On my terms, I was still getting used to the idea that I had terms. The Suffolk County Probate Court issued its ruling on January 31st, 2025. I sat in the courtroom beside Eleanor, wearing a simple black dress and my mother's silver bracelet. Harold Finch was at the plaintiff's table, his briefcase open, his expression calm. Across the aisle, my father sat with his legal team, 3 attorneys in expensive suits who had spent 2 weeks filing motions and objections and requests for delay. None of it had worked. Judge Patricia Coleman read the decision in a clear, measured voice. The court finds that the last will and testament of Thomas Hartwell, dated December 15, 1999, is authentic and legally binding. The petitioner, Sierra Holloway, is confirmed as the sole legitimate granddaughter referenced in Section 7.3. The transfer of 51% of Hartwell Industries shares to the petitioner, with Eleanor Vance serving as legal guardian and fiduciary representative until the petitioner reaches the age of majority, is hereby ordered. I heard Eleanor exhale beside me. Furthermore, the judge continued, The court notes with concern the evidence presented regarding the concealment of this will and the circumstances surrounding the termination of parental rights. These matters may warrant further investigation by appropriate authorities. My father's lead attorney requested a recess. The judge denied it. Mr. Hartwell, Judge Coleman said, looking directly at my father for the first time, you are hereby removed as CEO of Hartwell Industries, effective immediately, pending resolution of the ownership transfer and any subsequent investigations. The board of directors will appoint interim leadership. Richard Hartwell sat motionless in his chair. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. When we left the courthouse an hour later, reporters were waiting on the steps. Eleanor shielded me with her body as we pushed through to the waiting car. The headlines that evening were brutal, but they were also true. My father called 2 days after the court ruling. I was sitting in Eleanor's living room, working on homework I'd missed during the chaos of the past 2 weeks. My phone rang and his name appeared on the screen, the first time he'd tried to contact me directly since the gala. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Sierra. His voice sounded different, smaller. I know you probably don't want to talk to me. You're right. I don't. I made mistakes. He paused, and I heard him take a breath. I was wrong to hide the will. I was wrong to sign those papers without telling you. I was wrong about a lot of things. I waited. But you're still my daughter, he continued. Blood doesn't change just because of legal documents. I want to make things right. I want us to have a relationship. For a moment, I almost believed him. Then I remembered the note on the refrigerator. The photographs without me in them. The 12 years of being invisible in my own home. You're not calling because you regret what you did, I said quietly. You're calling because you lost everything. If that will had never surfaced, you'd still be pretending I didn't exist. That's not fair. Fair? I almost laughed. You want to talk about fair? You signed away your rights to me 3 months ago. You were planning to throw me out of the family as soon as the gala was over. You didn't even remember my birthday. Silence on the other end. Making things right would have been not hiding the will in the first place, I continued. Making things right would have been treating me like your daughter instead of a burden. You don't get to rewrite history just because you finally faced consequences. I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but my voice had been steady. That felt like progress. If you've ever had to set boundaries with family members who only reached out when they needed something, comment boundaries below. I want to hear your story. And if you want to see more stories about justice and healthy boundaries, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The ending of this story is something I think about every single day. Meredith asked to meet in person 1 month after the gala. I chose a coffee shop in Cambridge, neutral territory, public space, easy exit if things went wrong. Eleanor offered to come with me, but I wanted to do this alone. I needed to see who Meredith really was when there was no audience to perform for. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. She looked different without the designer clothes and perfect makeup. Younger somehow. More human. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I almost didn't. I know. She stared at her coffee. I've been thinking about what to say for weeks. I had this whole speech prepared, but now that you're here, it all sounds stupid. Try anyway. She took a breath. I didn't know about the will. I swear I didn't. Mom and Dad kept it from us, Brendan and me. They told us you were just difficult, that you didn't want to be part of the family, that you pushed us away. And you believed them. I was 7 when your mom died. I believed everything they told me. Her voice cracked. But that's not an excuse. I was cruel to you. I called you names. I made your life miserable because it was easier than asking questions. I watched her face, looking for the angle, the manipulation, the hidden agenda. All I saw was guilt. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Meredith said. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, what they did, what I helped them do. She finally met my eyes. I want to be better. I don't know how, but I want to try. Words are easy, I said. actions are harder. I know. So show me, over time, consistently, and maybe, we can build something new. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a door left slightly open. 3 months after the gala, Hartwell Industries released its first quarter earnings report. I sat in the conference room as an observer, 16 years old, still in high school, but legally entitled to be there as the majority shareholder. Eleanor sat beside me, taking notes, asking questions, doing the work of actually running a company while I learned. The numbers were better than anyone expected. Revenue is down 4% from last quarter, the interim CFO reported. But that's primarily due to the Meridian medical contract delay. We've successfully renegotiated the deal at $9 million, with signing scheduled for next week. The internal audit had uncovered $1.8 million in misallocated funds during my father's tenure. The investigation was ongoing, but preliminary findings suggested the money had been funneled into personal accounts disguised as consulting fees. My father was facing a civil lawsuit from the company's board. Criminal charges were possible but not yet filed. After the meeting, Eleanor walked me through the financial statements line by line. I was taking a business fundamentals course online, trying to understand the empire I'd inherited. It was overwhelming, but Eleanor was patient. You don't have to become CEO tomorrow, she reminded me. Or ever, if you don't want to. You just need to understand enough to make good decisions about who runs things in your name. What about after I turn 18? Then you'll have full control, but by then, you'll have 2 years of experience watching how the company operates. You'll be ready. I looked at the Hartwell Industries logo on the conference room wall, the same logo I'd seen on my father's business cards my whole life. It meant something different now. It meant responsibility, legacy, the chance to build something honest on the foundation my grandfather had laid. It meant I finally had a future worth fighting for. I woke up on January 16th, 2026, to the smell of cinnamon rolls baking. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains, and I lay there blinking at the ceiling, my heart racing with the old familiar dread. Birthday. Another year of being forgotten. Another note on the refrigerator. Then I remembered. I wasn't in my father's house anymore. I padded down the hallway to Eleanor's kitchen, where she stood at the stove in a flour-dusted apron, humming something soft and tuneless. The table was set for two, real plates, cloth napkins, a small vase of winter flowers. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." She turned and smiled, and there was nothing complicated in it. No agenda, no conditions, just love. On the table sat a cake with 17 candles and a wrapped box I hadn't noticed before. "Open it," Eleanor said. Inside was my mother's silver bracelet, the one I'd kept hidden in my memory box for years, but it had been cleaned and polished, and a new charm had been added, a tiny silver heart engraved with the date of my 16th birthday. "The day everything changed," Eleanor said softly. "The day you stopped being invisible." I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist, feeling the cool metal settle against my skin. Through the window, I could see Boston blanketed in fresh snow, the city sparkling in the winter sunlight. 1 year ago, I had cried alone in a dark kitchen, reading a note that called me a freak. Today, I sat across from someone who had spent 5 years fighting to find me, who had given me a home and a future, and the simple gift of being seen. I blew out the candles. I didn't need to make a wish. Everything I'd ever wanted was already here. If you're watching this and you feel the way I felt 1 year ago, invisible, unwanted, like a burden in your own home, I need you to know something. You are not the problem. They are. I spent 16 years trying to earn my father's love. I bent myself into shapes I thought would please him. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. I accepted cruelty because I believed I deserved it. But here's what I learned. Some people will never love you the way you need to be loved. Not because you're unlovable, but because they're incapable of loving anyone but themselves. And no amount of trying, no amount of being good enough will ever change that. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's survival. Walking away from people who hurt you isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself. And sometimes, the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to keep. I don't hate my father. Hating him would mean he still has power over me, and I'm done giving him that. I feel something closer to pity now. For a man so consumed by greed that he threw away his own daughter, rather than share what was never really his. My relationship with Meredith is complicated. We're building something slowly, carefully, with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. Brendan still hasn't reached out. Maybe he never will. I've made peace with that. Eleanor is my family now. Not because of blood or legal documents, but because she chose me. She fought for me. She showed up when no one else would. And that's what family really means. Thank you for listening to my story. If it helped you in any way, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you deserve to be loved. Not because you're perfect, but because you exist. That's enough. That's always been enough. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story touched you, please hit like and subscribe to support the channel. Comment below. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? I want to hear your experience. And don't forget to check the description for more stories like this one. Stories about justice, courage, and finding where you truly belong.